Hello and welcome to the Drive Formula podcast, where we take trust, communication, and action to accelerate your team from 0 to 60. My name is Marcus Williams, and this is the genius and brain trust behind the Drive Formula, Eric Lichty. So today is our deep dive into Chapter 2. So if you haven't listened to Chapter 2 yet, that episode is out as Episode 3, so go ahead and check that out. And we hope that you'll purchase the book so that you can follow along, highlight the parts that you like, come up with questions, and ask those questions in the comments, and we will discuss those in future episodes. So we want this to be a collaborative effort. We want your input so that purchase the book, follow along, and we hope that you can find it constructive and productive for you as well. So today we're diving into Chapter 2. So Eric, why don't you just kind of go over your thoughts on Chapter 2? We were talking before this, how you were excited about talking about the chapter. So let's hear what you have to say.
Okay, so I've been a mechanic since basically I was 15 years old. I've always worked on the side. I've worked on families' cars. Even though I've had a lot of different careers, I've always worked on cars and trucks. And it's amazing the machines that they are and what goes into that just to transport you from one location to another. But it's a lot of stuff that you don't ever think about. Like, for instance, I tell people, do you realize how many explosions, your controlled explosions that are, very controlled, but do you realize how many controlled explosions that you actually have per minute in a 4-cylinder vehicle? Well, you roughly idle around 1,000 RPM, so we'll just round it to that. You have 4,000 explosions within a minute, just in an idle. You go down the freeway, you triple that because most 4-cylinders are about 3,000 RPMs as they travel down the freeway. That's 12,000 explosions just to transport you from one location to another in 1 minute. And so there's a lot of things that you don't realize that goes into helping your car transport you and to basically serve you to get you where you need to go. And so how is that applied to what we're talking about? What do employees do that we honestly don't see? And on this flip side, what do leaders do that employees don't really see? And so it's really a two-way street that it's like, we don't realize what other people do. We need to have a little bit of trust that people are doing their job. And biggest key is show appreciation.
Yeah.
Because how often do you show it? Do you take your car in to get an oil change? You keep it washed. You do little things to just appreciate your car so it keeps running and operating correctly. When you start letting it go and you don't change your oil on time and you don't maintain it, you hear little noises, those little noises to go big and bigger, bigger, and then you go and have it serviced. What about employees? Or what about leaders? What are employees doing to help leaders, and vice versa? What are leaders doing to help employees, to help the workplace environment to really thrive so everybody can do their jobs?
Yeah, and I mean, and historically speaking, the corporations would say, take the job or leave it. It is what it is. If you don't like it, go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And people didn't have a choice to go anywhere else because that was the industry where they lived, and that's what they were trained to do. And they were kind of stuck in this job, and the employer, the boss, had the power. And there's a shift now where employees have more power, but that's false thinking. Where if you say employees have all the power now, that's not good either.
No,
because you're taking, you're shifting it completely opposite, and you're still out of whack. You're still out of center. You're swinging that pendulum from one side to the other when you need to be in the center. But it's all about recognizing, appreciating what the other person does, and if you can provide fulfillment in what they do and appreciation and help, then they'll enjoy the job, be more productive, be more engaged, which is kind of what this is all about, right?
It totally is. A car operates through communication and organization. It is constantly communicating with its computer on what the driver is demanding it to do. The driver gives it more gas. Then all the sensors know, okay, they're putting more demand on the car to make it go faster. To, if we go on the freeway, we have to speed up. We hit a hill, we have to speed up. We have to give more demand to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's always communicating within itself. just to transport us from one location to another. Imagine if the work environment could be that way, that it's like, hey, you know what? We've got this project due. We're ready to go. You guys have everything you need. Let's just hurry and get it done. We just put a lot of demand on our teams. Well, at the end of that, what's wrong with just simply showing appreciation? You guys did great. You really excelled at this. Pick out the little things that employees need to see. They need that communication. How hard is it to just tell somebody they did a good job? It's actually easier. And from my experience, it's easier to give somebody criticism than it is to show appreciation.
It is.
And I think that's awful. I've always been the one that it's like, if I give somebody criticism on something, I'm going to end the conversation with something that I saw positive, because I want them to know that they did a good job. We have in our mechanic shop, we like to hire people that have, passed, if they've been felonies, if they've been in jail, they've been looked over. It's amazing what you can do with them, because they, for instance, a story, one of my guys wrecked a car, and I heard it, and I came running in. He wrecked 2 cars in the shop, and I just came in, and I just like, oh my gosh, my eyes are just huge, and his eyes are huge. He was expecting me to just go off.
Yeah.
First off, I made sure that he was okay. He was okay, but you could see that he was just physically shaking, like, oh crap, there it goes. And I said, you know what? It's okay. Accidents happen. It ended up working out that it was, yes, 2 cars are wrecked. It still was an accident, but he learned from the situation. He was already beating himself up enough. I didn't need to intensify the situation at all.
Yeah.
In my mind and everything else, and then all the adrenaline, I was like, oh my gosh. But it all worked out. And so I've been able to retain that employee, and he's been an absolute awesome employee for us for years. But it's those little situations that's like, you can handle this, or to say that you appreciate it. I'm constantly remarking about how good his thought pattern was on how he did a job, because I want to build him as a person.
That's awesome. Yeah. And things shift and change, and we have to adapt. And you go online, you go on social media, there's always these wars between the generations, which are counterproductive, because there's good and bad in each, and we have to adapt to what works today, which doesn't mean you let go of things that worked in the past, but you adapt them. Simple example, on a Facebook page for a company I retired from, so we've got old timers, people that retired 20, 30 years ago, and we've got current employees are all in this group. And someone posted a picture of a current leader in that organization who was wearing a sport coat and jeans talking to the press. And this was one of the old timers talking, and said, in my day, you weren't allowed to wear jeans on the job. What's become of the young generation? And so there was these comments back and forth, where you'd get the guys who worked in the 70s and 80s and even the 60s. We wore a full suit and tie, dress slacks, and a hat to work every day. Nothing else was acceptable. Then you had we were able to wear a sport coat and a tie. And then you had the, current today, he's wearing a nice pair of jeans and a sport coat. What difference does it make if it works today? Yeah. I made a comment, because I was stationed once in the high desert in California, where it gets 115, 120 in the summer. And I had a boss who was from that old school that you should be wearing a suit and tie every day. And he tried to get me to wear a jacket during the summer in 29 Palms, California. And I said, this is crazy. Yeah. Like, who's going to respect me when I'm not smart enough to take off my jacket when I'm dying of heat, So that's a simple example, but that change, that shift was necessary, because people look at you differently today. What was seen as professional attire 20 years ago isn't today. Yep. So why make a big deal about that? Why there are some people that are still like, that's the hill they're going to die on, is wearing a suit and tie. Why?
It's funny that you talk about all this, and I can't believe how not progressive people tend to be. They don't think about adapting to the situation. Every employee can't be treated exactly the same. We all have different personalities. We all have different work ethics. We all have certain set skills, and that's what makes the workforce awesome.
Yeah.
Because if you had the same ones, then you'd just be a machine and you couldn't enjoy your work environment. But being that we're all different people and there's things that, you know, that one person really likes compared to another. Some people really like the, being criticized. That pushes them. That's almost their competitive edge. Me, I hate it when people just criticize me and never say anything positive about it.
Yeah.
And that's been most of my job positions besides my, current one. And, they need to adapt to the person and say, this is your job title. This is very well organized. Do it how you can do it best to meet your skills and abilities, and do the best that you can.
Yeah, and I'm a person where I don't need criticism or praise necessarily. I just need the freedom to do. I need clear objectives and the freedom to do my job. So I just need someone who gets out of my way, tells me this is what we want you to accomplish, and then lets me do it. And we're all different that way. And that's a point that we made in the chapter, was that every company is a car. So maybe you've taken those tests online or done those, what princess are you? What character out of Lord of the Rings are you? Things like that. What vehicle is your vehicle as a person, like your professional identity?
Yeah.
Just, what vehicle would you compare that to? And what vehicle is your company? And there was an exercise in this chapter where we asked you to go through the companies you've worked for and assign them a vehicle. So, did you work for a truck? Did you work for a sports car? Did you work for a sedan? And you can make those connections very easily in your head. Once you start thinking about that, think about your job, assign it a car, just like one of those online quiz things. They're fun, they're silly, but we had you do that exercise for a purpose, because that matters. The identity of your business matters, because if you're a Ferrari and the company's a truck,
doesn't match.
That's not going to fit very well. Or if they advertise that they're a truck, but they're actually a two-door sedan, you're going to be very disappointed when you show up to work the first day and realize you're in the wrong garage,
Yep. And that's the big thing is it's like companies need to help identify it. And biggest thing about a car is how it all operates. It's all communicating and it's all organized. Well, how many organizations are really communicating their, all their, wow, all their expectations.
Yeah.
Sorry, lost the words. But all their expectations to their employees. Have you ever gone into a place and said, here's our expectations of what you need to do. Now, do you have any expectations of us as leaders? Marcus is somebody, you give him a project, he's going to go and figure out and just do it. Me, I like to ask questions and communicate. So it's like I know how my leader wants it to be done, and I communicate a little bit more. I ask questions because I've been in job environments that I've tried to do that. I've got their input, and then all of a sudden it changes. I'm like, oh, well, you told me this. Well, that's not how it is this time. So it's all of a sudden changed. And so I'm like, well, that's why I try to communicate and I try to ask.
Tell me about it.
And through talking with customers at my mechanic shop, I try to get as much information about their car problem so I can figure out the exact problem, because they're the best ones that are going to know their car. And I even sometimes take drives with them and say, is this the noise it's making? Is this what it's doing? Just to identify what it is so I can fix the problem right.
Yeah. I mean, have you ever been to a doctor who refuses to listen to you and tells you what's important and what's not, and you're sitting there trying to tell them, no, I have this pain, you're not listening to me, and they completely misdiagnose you because they don't listen?
Yeah, I just left a doctor because of that,
Right.
honestly.
I just fired a doctor because of that too. And I told him when I left him, I said, I'm looking for a doctor who's willing to listen to me and collaborate in my care because it's my body. So see ya.
Yeah. Nope, that's totally it. But yeah, so leaders and employees, they can communicate and they can make the workplace a lot better just through simple communication, organization, and showing appreciation.
Right. And recognizing that there's a power balance. You need to find balance. Instead of looking for the dynamic of who has the power, get rid of that
Yeah.
thinking. It's not about power, it's about working together to provide a service or a product to be successful. It's not about who has the most power. If you're a leader, that just means you have a different job. You have different roles and responsibilities. It doesn't mean that you are better. And of course, there are problem employees. Of course, there's sometimes you have to discipline, sometimes you have to fire. But we're talking about people who, when they apply for your job, they apply for it because they want it. They believe they can do it. So why not give them the tools and resources to do what they basically came to you asking to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at a car, we put a demand on that to transport us from one location to another. I had a customer a couple months ago that said, my check engine light came on. It started smoking. I noticed that it was leaking, but I had to get to these couple areas, and she drove an extra 30 miles, and then it died on her. Well, what did she expect? That car was communicating that it was done and that it needed service. It ended up blowing up the engine. It gave her so many different signs, and then she was upset at it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't say she, but it's
That's
true.
That's right.
So many people come into my thing, well, I just needed to go this much farther. And how many times as leaders do we just try to do that with employees and don't see the signs that it's like, maybe we actually teach these different leadership motives in the end of the book. And so if you want to go ahead and buy the book and see them, but there's different leadership styles that really come into play here. Just as a driver, you look at the car, it needs maintenance. It's going to stop on me. It's not going to transport me from one location to another. Your employees are the same type of idea. If you don't see that they do have their troubles and they sometimes have barriers that they've got to work on, that they need you as a leader to be more of a support system to say, you know what, you're doing this really good. Maybe if you just shifted your mindset this way and understand that, you are confident in your abilities and your strengths, and give them a little bit of a pat on the back. It's okay. You are all in there to transport an organization forward.
Right. And that's it. Chapter 2 is short, but it's all about shifting your thinking, and changing the way that you look at the relationship between employees and leaders. To say, as a leader, you have a response. If you want that person to really be engaged and productive and long term, you have a responsibility to create an environment where they can be and where they will want to be. And that's the payoff is I'll do a good job for you if you provide me the tools and resources to do it. Otherwise, it's no longer where they're stuck with the same employer for 40 years. That world is gone. We need to get rid of that thinking. If they're not happy where they are, they're going to move on. And it costs companies millions of dollars a year just in rehiring and retraining new employees because they couldn't retain their old ones. And if they can't retain one, they're not going to retain 2 or 3 or 4. So it's an ongoing cost. It's not just a one-time cost. Whereas you could invest more in the employee you have, keep them engaged, keep them happy, and have them long term. What is the better choice? Yet we continue to see companies making the wrong choice.
So this is a good point to tell you about the drive formula. The drive formula, we go into organizations and we actually diagnose the engagement issues. Just like I diagnose a car, I see all the different sensors. I see all the communication. I look at people's job responsibilities. I look at if they have the right systems, software, ergonomics of the office system. And I also look at them and see where they are at. I look at helping to build them in their professional identity, but I also look at leaders And so we do, and see what the leaders need as far as helping to help them communicate better, help them to organize better. We don't want to see people get fired. We'd rather see people get retained and build them so that they can be an asset to the community, to the company, instead of a liability. And so that's what the drive formula is all about. Sometimes, in rare cases, there is not a fit, but we'd like to help people to get into a different job if that's the case. But we really want to see retention. And that's what the drive formula is about, is creating the right environment for people to thrive, leaders and employees.
Right. And
teams, yeah.
And that helps mental health.
Absolutely.
Which is the bottom line of this whole thing. And what we are looking to do is to increase positive mental health in the workforce, because that's where we spend the majority of our day every day.
Yeah. And so that's how I came up with the whole system of, identity or liking cars and how they operate to how a business can operate, is I actually wanted to combat depression on a large level. And we will be able to do that because we will go and be able to build people and groups and teams and leaders and see their strengths and help them to better communicate, better organize, so it helps the whole environment to actually be productive and efficient. I mean, when people are happy, that's where efficiency comes through.
Right.
And productivity. And so it's a natural way to get more productive out of people. But the big thing is helping people to see their natural strengths, abilities, and to build them. Leaders, employees, groups, everything to that effect. And so that's what our whole purpose with the drive formula is help combat depression on a large level through the workplace environment.
Right, exactly.
And so that's the drive formula for you.
Awesome. So that's our deep dive into chapter 2. Stay tuned, subscribe in whatever format whether you're watching it or you're listening, please subscribe, hit that notification button so you see when a new episode comes out. Next week's episode will be our audiobook of chapter 3. So we will read chapter 3 so that can prepare you for the deep dive the following week. So chapter, deep dive, that's the way, it's our format here. So hope you enjoyed. Please leave us a comment if you have questions, if you have comments, put those, or you can send us an email as well at support@thedriveformula.com. And we would love to discuss those questions in a future episode, because you are going to have insights from your experiences that we can relate to the drive formula. And that helps everybody. If you have an experience, odds are someone else has had the same type of experience and would love to hear from you. So leave those comments, send us those questions, and we'll see you next time on the Drive Formula podcast.